Emma Richardson never expected that learning to kick a heavy bag would save her dignity at the spring formal. But sometimes life has a way of preparing you for battles you never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The gymnasium at Westfield High School buzzed with pre-dance excitement as students streamed through the decorated entrance. Paper lanterns and soft pastels hung from the ceiling, and the theme, Enchanted Garden, had transformed the usually sterile space into something magical. Emma stood at the edge of the parking lot, smoothing down her pale blue dress one final time before heading inside. At 16, Emma had mastered the art of existing in the spaces between not popular enough to be noticed, not unpopular enough to be targeted. Her auburn hair fell in gentle waves past her shoulders, and her green eyes held a quiet intelligence that most people overlooked. She preferred it that way. The dress she wore tonight was a simple Align design that her mother had found at a consignment shop, altered to fit Emma's petite frame perfectly. It wasn't designer, but it made her feel beautiful in a way she rarely experienced. What her classmates at Westfield High didn't know was that for the past 6 years, Emma had been disappearing 3 times a week to a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Master Chun's traditional martial arts academy wasn't much to look at from the outside. Concrete walls, small windows, and a faded sign that most people drove past without a second glance. But inside, it was where Emma had found herself. The journey had started when she was 10 years old. Her older brother Michael had been getting into trouble at school, fighting with kids who called him names for being half Asian. Their mother, Sarah Richardson, had been at her wit's end until a co-worker suggested martial arts as a way to channel Michael's anger constructively. The family had visited 3 different schools before finding Master Chun's academy. Master Chun was a second-generation Chinese American who had grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown, learning traditional kung fu from his grandfather. He was in his 50s now, with graying hair and the kind of quiet presence that commanded respect without demanding it. When the Richardson family walked into his school that first day, he had taken one look at Michael's defensive posture and Emma's wide-eyed curiosity and made them both an offer. Fighting is not about anger, he had told them in his soft-spoken way. It's about understanding yourself and protecting what matters. If you want to learn, you must be willing to be patient. Real skill takes years to develop. Michael had lasted 6 months before losing interest and moving on to baseball. But Emma had stayed. Something about the precise movements, the mental discipline, and the way Master Chun taught respect alongside technique had captivated her. While other girls her age were trying out for cheerleading or joining the drama club, Emma was learning the ancient art of Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. The training had been grueling from the beginning. Master Chun believed in building character through physical challenge, and he never went easy on his students because of age or gender. Emma spent her first year learning basic stances, conditioning her shins and knuckles, and practicing forms that seemed to have no practical application. Many nights she came home exhausted, her legs shaking from holding horse stance for increasingly longer periods. Why do we have to hold these positions for so long? She had asked Master Chun during her 3rd month of training. Because, he had replied, adjusting her stance slightly, real strength comes from the inside. Your legs must be like tree roots strong, enough to support whatever storm comes your way. Your mind must be calm enough to see clearly when others are in chaos. These basics are not punishment, Emma. They are the foundation of everything you will ever be able to do. By her 2nd year, Emma had begun to understand what he meant. The physical conditioning had built more than just strength, it had built confidence. The mental discipline required to master complex forms had improved her focus in school. And the philosophical aspects of Kung Fu, with their emphasis on harmony and controlled power, had given her a framework for understanding conflict that none of her peers possessed. Master Chun had recognized her natural talent early on. Emma had excellent flexibility, quick reflexes, and most importantly, the patience to perfect techniques through endless repetition. But it was her kicks that truly set her apart. While other students in the school focused on hand techniques or grappling, Emma had developed a devastating array of kicks that could generate power far beyond what her small frame suggested. The roundhouse kick had become her signature technique. Unlike the flashy high kicks seen in movies, Emma's roundhouse was a thing of brutal efficiency. She could deliver it at knee level, thigh level, or body level with equal precision. The power came not from her leg alone, but from the rotation of her entire body, the snap of her hip, and the perfect timing that came from thousands of hours of practice. "Your kicks are weapons," Master Chun had told her during her 4th year of training. "They can disable an opponent much larger than you. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. These techniques are for protection, not aggression. You must promise me that you will never use what I teach you unless you have no other choice." Emma had promised, and she had kept that promise through 6 years of training. She had earned her black belt the previous summer, though she had asked Master Chun not to make a big ceremony of it. She preferred to keep her achievements private, just as she kept her training private from everyone at school. The decision to hide her martial arts background hadn't been conscious at first. When she started high school, she had simply never found the right moment to mention it. Her classmates assumed she was just another quiet bookworm, and she had never bothered to correct them. Over time, she had come to appreciate the invisibility it provided. She could observe the social dynamics of high school without being pulled into them, could focus on her studies without the distractions that seemed to consume her peers. Her parents had been supportive of her training, though they didn't fully understand it. Her mother sometimes worried about the bruises Emma came home with, and her father occasionally made jokes about his daughter being tougher than he was. But they had seen how the discipline had shaped her character, how it had given her confidence and focus, and they trusted her judgment. The only person who truly understood was Master Chun. He had become more than just an instructor over the years. He was a mentor, a father figure, and sometimes the only adult who seemed to really see her. He had watched her grow from a curious 10-year-old into a skilled martial artist and a thoughtful young woman. He had been the one to help her understand that strength wasn't about dominating others, but about protecting yourself and those who couldn't protect themselves. True warriors, he had told her just last month during a particularly intense training session, are those who can walk away from a fight. Anyone can throw a punch when they're angry, but it takes real strength to choose peace when you have the power to destroy. Those words had stuck with her as she navigated the increasingly complex social landscape of high school. Westfield High was typical of suburban schools, not particularly rough, but with its share of cliques, drama, and casual cruelty. Emma had watched classmates tear each other down with words, had seen students picked on for being different, and had felt the familiar urge to intervene. But she had always found other ways to help: a quiet word of encouragement to a bullied student, anonymous tips to teachers about serious problems, or simply being kind to those who seemed lonely. Tonight, as she walked toward the gymnasium entrance, Emma felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. School dances weren't really her thing. She preferred the quiet satisfaction of a good book or the focused intensity of training. But her best friend Riley had convinced her to come, and part of her was curious about experiencing this quintessential high school moment. Riley Martinez was everything Emma wasn't: outgoing, popular, and completely comfortable being the center of attention. They had been friends since middle school, drawn together by their shared love of classic movies and their mutual disdain for unnecessary drama. Riley was one of the few people who knew about Emma's martial arts training, though she didn't fully understand the depth of Emma's skill. "You need to put yourself out there more," Riley had said when convincing Emma to buy a dress for the dance. "High school is supposed to be about making memories, not just studying all the time." Besides, you look amazing in that dress. People should see that side of you." Emma had laughed at the time, but now, walking into the decorated gymnasium, she wondered if Riley had been right. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows a little bit. Maybe she could enjoy one night of being just a normal teenager, without worrying about training schedules or maintaining her careful invisibility. The gymnasium was already half full with students dancing, talking, and posing for photos. The DJ was playing a mix of current hits and classic dance songs, and the lighting had been dimmed to create an intimate atmosphere. Emma spotted Riley near the refreshment table, looking stunning in a red dress that perfectly complemented her dark hair and olive skin. "Emma," Riley called out, waving her over. "You made it! And you look absolutely beautiful." Emma smiled, feeling some of her nervousness fade. "Thanks. This is actually kind of nice. I wasn't sure what to expect. See? I told you, sometimes you just need to trust me." Riley grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a group of their classmates. "Come on, let's get some photos." For the next hour, Emma found herself genuinely enjoying the experience. She danced with Riley and their small group of friends, laughed at the awkward attempts of classmates trying to impress their dates, and even managed to relax enough to forget about her usual hyper-awareness of her surroundings, that it was during a slow song that she first noticed the group watching her from across the room. 3 girls stood near the far wall, their expressions ranging from curious to calculating. Emma recognized them immediately. They were part of the popular crowd that usually ignored her existence entirely. Jessica Hamilton stood at the center of the group, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, and her designer dress making everyone else's outfits look cheap by comparison. She was the kind of girl who had been born into popularity, wealthy family, natural beauty, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to question her place in the world. But there was something sharp in her blue eyes, something that suggested her picture-perfect exterior hid a less pleasant interior. Flanking her were her 2 constant companions, Madison Brooks, a redhead with a cruel smile and a reputation for spreading gossip, and Chloe Stewart, a brunette who seemed to exist solely to agree with whatever Jessica said. The 3 of them had ruled the social scene at Westfield High since freshman year, and Emma had always been grateful to be beneath their notice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But tonight, for some reason, she had caught their attention. And judging by the way they were looking at her like predators sizing up prey, that wasn't necessarily a good thing. Emma tried to dismiss the feeling of unease that crept up her spine. She was probably just being paranoid. After all, what reason would Jessica and her friends have to be interested in her? She was nobody special, just another face in the crowd. But as the song ended and the lights came up slightly, Emma caught Jessica's eye across the room. The blonde girl's smile was cold and calculating, and she said something to her friends that made them laugh in a way that didn't sound pleasant at all. Master Chun had always taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct she had was telling her that trouble was coming. The question was whether she could avoid it, or whether this would be the night she finally had to choose between staying invisible and standing up for herself. The night was young, and Emma had no idea that her 6 years of training were about to be put to the ultimate test. Jessica Hamilton had been planning this moment for 3 weeks, ever since she'd noticed Emma Richardson's name on the spring formal ticket list. It wasn't that Emma had done anything specific to earn Jessica's attention, quite the opposite. Emma's very existence as an unnoticed, unremarkable student had somehow become an affront to Jessica's carefully constructed social order. The Hamilton family had moved to Westfield 2 years ago when Jessica's father, a successful corporate lawyer, had taken a position with the town's most prestigious law firm. They had purchased the largest house in the exclusive Maple Ridge neighborhood, complete with a circular driveway, professionally landscaped gardens, and a swimming pool that had become the site of the most coveted parties in town. Jessica had arrived at Westfield High as a sophomore with every advantage money could buy: designer clothes, perfect teeth courtesy of years of orthodontic work, and the kind of polished confidence that came from attending elite private schools. She had quickly identified the existing power structure and systematically dismantled it, replacing the previous queen bee with herself through a combination of charm, manipulation, and strategic cruelty. But Jessica's reign wasn't built on simple meanness. She was far too intelligent for that. Instead, she had created a complex social ecosystem where her approval became the currency that everyone desperately wanted to earn. She gave just enough kindness to keep people hoping, while wielding just enough cruelty to keep them afraid. It was a delicate balance that required constant maintenance and the occasional reminder of her power. The problem with Emma Richardson was that she seemed completely immune to this system. She didn't seek Jessica's approval, didn't compete for her attention, and didn't even seem to notice that Jessica existed. For someone who had built her identity around being the center of her universe, Emma's indifference was deeply unsettling. "She thinks she's better than us," Jessica had told Madison and Chloe during lunch the previous week, watching Emma eat alone at a corner table with a book propped open beside her tray. "Look at her, sitting there like she's too good to talk to anyone." Madison Brooks had been Jessica's lieutenant since middle school, back when they had attended Westfield's private preparatory academy together. Madison's family wasn't quite as wealthy as the Hamiltons, but they had enough money and social standing to make her a valuable ally. Madison had learned early that her path to relevance ran through Jessica, and she had perfected the art of amplifying Jessica's opinions while making them sound like her own original thoughts. "I know, right?" Madison had replied, her voice carrying just the right note of indignation. "She acts like she's some kind of mysterious intellectual or something. It's so pretentious." Chloe Stewart completed their trio, though her role was quite different from Madison's. Chloe's family owned the largest car dealership in town, which made them wealthy but not necessarily sophisticated. Chloe had been desperate to break into Jessica's circle since freshman year, and her acceptance had come with the understanding that she would never challenge Jessica's authority or compete for Madison's position as second in command. "Maybe she's just shy," Chloe had suggested tentatively, immediately regretting the words when she saw Jessica's expression darken. "Shy?" Jessica had laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's a difference between being shy and being stuck-up, Chloe. Trust me, I know the difference." The truth was more complicated than Jessica would ever admit, even to herself. Emma Richardson reminded her of someone she used to be, someone she had worked very hard to leave behind. Before the family money, before the private schools, before the perfectly curated image, Jessica had been an awkward middle schooler with frizzy hair and second-hand clothes. She had been the one sitting alone, the one other kids ignored or mocked. The transformation had come with her family's financial success and her father's promotion. Suddenly there was money for better clothes, professional hairstyling, and all the social advantages that wealth could provide. Jessica had reinvented herself completely, burying the insecure girl she used to be under layers of confidence and control. But Emma's quiet self-possession triggered something deep and uncomfortable in Jessica's psyche. It reminded her that confidence didn't always have to be performed, that strength didn't always have to be displayed. Emma seemed to possess naturally what Jessica had to work constantly to maintain, and that was unforgivable. The plan had crystallized 3 weeks ago when Jessica overheard Emma and Riley discussing whether to attend the spring formal. Jessica had immediately decided that the dance would be the perfect setting for what she had started thinking of as putting Emma in her place. The public nature of the event, the formal attire that would make any humiliation more dramatic, and the fact that it would happen in front of the entire school, it was too perfect an opportunity to pass up. "We need to do something about Emma Richardson," Jessica had announced to her inner circle during their regular after-school strategy session at her house. They were lounging by the pool, sipping iced coffees, and planning their outfits for the dance. "What do you mean?" Madison had asked, though the gleam in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what Jessica meant. "I mean, it's time she learned where she fits in the social order around here. She's been coasting along, thinking she can just ignore everyone and act like she's above it all. It's time for a reality check." Chloe had shifted uncomfortably. While she was willing to go along with Jessica's social manipulations, she had never been comfortable with outright cruelty. "What did you have in mind?" Jessica's smile had been cold and calculating. "Nothing too serious. Just a little reminder that nobody gets to float above the rest of us without consequences. The spring formal will be perfect, lots of witnesses. Formal attire, everyone recording everything on their phones." The planning had been meticulous. Jessica had studied Emma's routines, noting that she always arrived at school events exactly on time, never early or late. She had observed Emma's friendship with Riley, identifying it as both a potential vulnerability and a complication that would need to be managed. Most importantly, she had carefully considered what kind of humiliation would be most effective. Physical violence was out of the question, too crude, and it would reflect poorly on Jessica's carefully maintained image. Academic sabotage wouldn't work because Emma's grades were solid and her teachers liked her. Social exclusion was pointless because Emma didn't seem to care about being included in the first place. But everyone cared about being humiliated in public, especially when dressed up for a formal event. Everyone had insecurities about their appearance, their clothes, their social status. Jessica just needed to find Emma's particular weak spot and exploit it at exactly the right moment. The dress had provided the perfect opportunity. Jessica had been at the mall with Madison and Chloe the weekend before the dance when she spotted Emma and her mother shopping at a consignment store. Through the window, she had watched Emma try on a simple blue dress, had seen the way her face lit up when she looked at herself in the mirror. "Look," Jessica had whispered to her friends, nodding toward the consignment shop. "Princess Emma is shopping for her ball gown." They had watched from a distance as Emma and her mother completed their purchase, noting the careful way Emma carried the dress bag, the obvious pride and excitement on her face. It was clear that this dress meant something special to her, which made it the perfect target. "That's actually kind of pretty," Chloe had commented absently, then caught herself when she saw Jessica's expression. "I mean, for a consignment store dress, it's pathetic," Madison had corrected quickly. "Showing up to spring formal in a used dress? How embarrassing." Jessica had said nothing at the time, but her mind was already working. The dress would be Emma's moment of vulnerability, her one night of trying to fit in with everyone else. And that made it the perfect thing to destroy. The plan she devised was elegant in its simplicity. She would wait until the dance was in full swing, until Emma was relaxed and enjoying herself, until there were plenty of people around to witness what happened next. Then she would create a situation where Emma's dress would be damaged in a way that appeared accidental, but was actually carefully orchestrated. "Accidents happen at dances all the time," she had explained to Madison and Chloe. "People spill drinks, bump into each other, trip over their dresses. It's not our fault if Emma is clumsy." Madison had been immediately on board, as Jessica had known she would be. The opportunity to participate in taking down someone who had ignored their existence was too appealing for Madison to resist. Chloe had been more reluctant, but her fear of being excluded from Jessica's circle had ultimately overridden her moral objections. The details had been worked out over several planning sessions. They would position themselves strategically around the gymnasium, creating opportunities for accidents to occur. Madison would be responsible for isolating Emma from Riley and her other friends, while Chloe would help create the right circumstances for the main event. Jessica herself would deliver the coup de grace, whatever action would result in the most Dramatic damage to Emma's dress and dignity. Remember, Jessica had emphasized during their final planning meeting, this has to look completely natural. We're just having fun at a dance, and if someone gets in the way of our fun, well, that's their problem. The psychological aspect was just as important as the physical execution. Jessica understood that the real damage wouldn't come from a torn dress that could be repaired or replaced. The real damage would come from the public humiliation, from being exposed as someone who didn't belong, from having her moment of happiness destroyed in front of everyone she went to school with. The key, Jessica had told her co-conspirators, is to make her feel like she was stupid for thinking she could play dress up with the rest of us. By the time we're done, she never want to come to another school event again. Now standing in the decorated gymnasium and watching Emma laugh with her friends, Jessica felt the familiar thrill that came with having power over someone else's happiness. Emma looked genuinely happy, genuinely beautiful in her simple blue dress, genuinely like she belonged at this dance, which made what was about to happen so much more satisfying. Jessica checked her phone, noting the time. The dance had been going for just over an hour, long enough for people to relax and stop paying close attention to everything around them, but not so long that anyone was ready to leave. The lighting was dim enough to create some confusion about exactly what happened, but bright enough that everyone would be able to see the results clearly. "It's time," she texted to Madison and Chloe, then slipped her phone back into her small evening purse. Madison received the message first and immediately began moving toward Riley, ready to create the distraction they had planned. Chloe hesitated for a moment, her conscience making one last attempt to prevent what was about to happen. But the fear of Jessica's wrath was stronger than her moral qualms, and she began moving toward her assigned position. Jessica herself started making her way through the crowd, her movements casual and unhurried. To anyone watching, she was just another student enjoying the dance, maybe heading to the restroom or the refreshment table. No one would suspect that she was actually a predator closing in on her prey. Emma was still dancing with her small group of friends, completely unaware that she had been marked for destruction. Her face was flushed with happiness, her eyes bright with the kind of joy that came from stepping outside her comfort zone and discovering that the world wasn't as scary as she had thought. Jessica's smile widened as she got closer. In just a few minutes, that happiness would be replaced with humiliation and tears. Emma Richardson was about to learn that there were consequences for thinking she could exist outside the social order that Jessica had worked so hard to create and maintain. The trap was set, the players were in position, and the target was completely unaware of what was coming. Jessica Hamilton had orchestrated public humiliations before, but this one felt particularly sweet. Tonight, the quiet girl who thought she was too good for everyone else would finally be put in her place. What Jessica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Emma Richardson was far from helpless. The shy, bookish exterior that had made her seem like such an easy target was hiding 6 years of disciplined training and a strength that went far deeper than anything Jessica could imagine. The collision course was set, but the outcome would be nothing like what Jessica had planned. The first move came disguised as friendship. Madison Brooks materialized beside Riley Martinez, just as the DJ transitioned into a particularly energetic pop song, her smile bright and seemingly genuine. "Riley, oh my God, you look absolutely stunning tonight," Madison gushed, her voice pitched perfectly to sound sincere. "That red dress is just gorgeous on you. Where did you get it?" Riley, caught off guard by the unexpected attention from one of the school's most popular students, smiled back cautiously. "Thank you, it's from that boutique downtown Bella's. I love that place," Madison exclaimed, though she had never set foot inside the modest shop. "You have such great taste. And Emma looks really nice too," she added, glancing toward Emma with what appeared to be genuine admiration. Emma felt a warning tingle at the base of her neck. In 6 years of martial arts training, Master Chun had taught her to recognize the subtle signs that preceded an attack, the slight shift in an opponent's stance, the tightening around their eyes, the false relaxation that came before explosive movement. Madison's compliment felt like verbal camouflage, too bright and sudden to be genuine. "Thanks," Emma replied simply, not wanting to be rude but trusting her instincts enough to remain guarded. "I was just thinking," Madison continued, her attention focused primarily on Riley. "You should totally come sit with us for a while. Jessica was just saying how she never really gets to talk to you guys, and she thinks you're both so interesting." Riley's eyes widened slightly. An invitation to sit with Jessica Hamilton's circle was the kind of social opportunity that most Westfield students could only dream about. "Really? That's so nice of her." Emma's warning system escalated from tingle to full alert. She had observed Jessica's group enough to know that they didn't issue casual invitations to people they had previously ignored. "Actually, Riley, didn't you want to get some fresh air? It's getting pretty warm in here." "Oh, come on," Madison laughed, the sound musical and persuasive. "The night is young. Besides, Jessica specifically asked about you both. She feels terrible that you guys have been sitting over here by yourselves all night." The manipulation was subtle but effective. By suggesting that Emma and Riley had been sitting alone, which wasn't even true, Madison had planted a seed of social insecurity. She had also made it seem like refusing the invitation would be antisocial and ungrateful. Riley glanced at Emma uncertainly. "I mean, it might be fun to meet some new people." Emma could see her friend wavering, could recognize the appeal of finally being included in the inner circle. But every instinct she had was screaming danger. "Riley, I really think we should—" "Perfect!" Madison interrupted, already beginning to guide Riley away from their table. "Jessica is going to be so excited. She's right over by the windows with the rest of the gang." Emma found herself in an impossible position. She could either follow along and walk directly into whatever trap was being set, or she could let Riley go alone and potentially put her friend in danger. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Coming, Emma?" Madison called over her shoulder, her smile never wavering but her eyes holding a challenge. "Of course," Emma replied, falling into step behind them. She used the moment to scan the gymnasium, noting the positions of teachers, the locations of exits, and the current configuration of students on the dance floor. The military strategist Sun Tzu, whose work Master Chun had required her to study, had written about the importance of understanding terrain before battle. Emma had never imagined she would need to apply those lessons at a high school dance. Jessica's corner had been carefully chosen for maximum visibility and strategic advantage. The windows provided natural lighting that made everyone look more attractive, while the position near the wall ensured that Jessica's group couldn't be approached from behind. It was a queen's court, designed to project power and control. "Riley!" "Emma!" Jessica called out as they approached, her arms outstretched in a gesture of welcome that looked warm, but felt calculated. "I'm so glad Madison found you. Come sit with us." Chloe Stewart shifted over to make room, her smile nervous and her eyes avoiding direct contact with Emma. The body language told Emma everything she needed to know. Chloe was uncomfortable with whatever was about to happen, which meant something was definitely about to happen. "This is such a beautiful dance," Jessica continued, settling back into her chair with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable being the center of attention. The decorating committee really outdid themselves. Though I have to say, the DJ's song choices have been a bit questionable. "I think the music's been great," Riley offered, still slightly starstruck by the unexpected inclusion. "Oh, totally," Madison agreed quickly. "I just meant some of the slower songs have been a little intense. Like, not everyone here is part of a couple, you know." The comment was carefully designed to probe for information about Emma and Riley's romantic situations, knowledge that could be weaponized later. Emma recognized the technique from observing playground politics in elementary school, though Jessica's version was far more sophisticated. "We're just here to have fun and dance with friends," Emma said neutrally, giving away nothing. "That's so sweet," Jessica replied, her tone sugary. "Although I have to say, Emma, I'm surprised to see you here at all. You always seem so focused on other things." The word focused carried just enough emphasis to suggest that Emma's priorities were somehow misguided or antisocial. It was the kind of subtle verbal jab that Jessica had perfected, hurtful enough to sting, but innocent enough to be denied if challenged. "I like school events," Emma replied truthfully. "I just don't usually have time for them." Right, Jessica nodded knowingly. "You're always so busy with. What is it that keeps you so busy anyway?" The question seemed casual, but Emma recognized it as reconnaissance. Jessica was fishing for information, looking for vulnerabilities or secrets that could be exploited. The smart play was to give a boring, uninteresting answer that would discourage further probing. Homework mostly. "I help my mom with stuff around the house." Nothing exciting. "That's so responsible of you," Madison chimed in. "Not everyone our age is so mature." The backhanded compliment was designed to make Emma sound prematurely old and boring compared to her peers. Emma simply nodded and said nothing, refusing to be drawn into defending her choices. Riley, meanwhile, was clearly enjoying the attention and inclusion. She laughed at Jessica's jokes, complimented Chloe's dress, and seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that Emma was picking up on. It was painful to watch her friend being manipulated, but Emma couldn't warn her without seeming paranoid or antisocial. "You know what?" Jessica said suddenly, as if struck by inspiration. "We should get some photos together. This is such a special night, and I want to remember it." She pulled out her phone with practiced ease, the camera already open and ready. "Everyone gather in close." The photo session that followed was masterful in its psychological manipulation. Jessica positioned herself at the center of every shot, with Riley and the others arranged around her, like satellites. Emma found herself consistently placed at the edges of the frame, sometimes partially cut off by the phone's camera angle. "Oh, that one's cute," Jessica exclaimed after each shot, immediately checking the result. "But let me try one more." With each successive photo, Emma was moved slightly further from the center, her position becoming more marginal and awkward. It was a visual representation of social hierarchy, designed to make Emma feel like an outsider even while technically being included. "Emma, you're being so quiet," Madison observed with apparent concern. "Are you feeling okay?" The question put Emma in another impossible position. If she said she was fine, she would seem antisocial for not participating more enthusiastically. If she admitted to feeling uncomfortable, she would be acknowledging that something was wrong, which could be used against her. "I'm just listening," Emma replied. "You all have interesting stories." "You're so thoughtful," Chloe said, her voice carrying a note of genuine admiration that seemed to surprise even herself. "I wish I was better at just listening to people." The comment created a moment of awkward silence, as if Chloe had accidentally said something too real and honest for the carefully constructed social theater they were performing. Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Chloe's always been the sweet one in our group," Jessica said with a laugh that had sharp edges. "Sometimes too sweet for her own good." The warning in Jessica's voice was subtle but unmistakable. Chloe's face flushed, and she quickly looked down at her hands. Emma felt a stab of sympathy for the girl, recognizing a fellow victim of Jessica's psychological manipulation. "I think being sweet is a good thing," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying enough warmth to let Chloe know the comment was genuine. Chloe looked up in surprise, her eyes meeting Emma's for the first time that evening. For a moment something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or simply the recognition that they were both trying to navigate Jessica's complex social minefield. "Absolutely," Riley agreed, oblivious to the deeper dynamics at play. There's nothing wrong with being nice to people. Jessica's jaw tightened slightly, and Emma realized they had stumbled into territory that threatened her carefully maintained control. Jessica's power depended on keeping people slightly off balance and insecure. Moments of genuine connection or mutual support undermined that power structure. "Of course," Jessica said, recovering her composure quickly. "Though sometimes people mistake being nice for being naive. It's important to be able to tell the difference between friends and, well, people who might not have your best interests at heart." The comment was clearly directed at Emma, suggesting that her presence in their circle was somehow predatory or manipulative. It was a masterful piece of psychological warfare, taking Emma's genuine kindness to Chloe and reframing it as potential deception. Emma felt her training instincts kick in more strongly. Master Chun had taught her about different types of combat. And this was definitely combat, just fought with words and social positioning instead of fists and feet. Jessica was a skilled opponent, possibly more dangerous than any physical adversary Emma had ever faced in the training hall. "That's so true," Madison agreed enthusiastically. "You really have to be careful about people who try to get close to you just because they want something." The irony was staggering. Madison was literally describing exactly what she and Jessica were doing to Riley at that very moment. But Emma knew that pointing this out would only make her look defensive and paranoid. "I think most people are basically good," Riley said, her natural optimism shining through. "Sure, some people might have hidden agendas, but I like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt." "That's because you have such a pure heart," Jessica said with apparent sincerity. "It's one of the things I really admire about you, Riley. You see the best in everyone." The compliment was perfectly calculated. It made Riley feel special and appreciated, while simultaneously suggesting that her trusting nature made her vulnerable. It also positioned Jessica as someone who truly understood and valued Riley's character. Classic manipulation technique. Emma watched the conversation continue, recognizing that she was witnessing a master class in social manipulation. Jessica was systematically isolating Emma while drawing Riley deeper into her web of influence. Every comment was designed to serve multiple purposes, every gesture carefully calculated for maximum psychological impact. The evening was far from over, and Emma could sense that the real attack hadn't even begun yet. This was all just preparation, softening the target, gathering intelligence, positioning the pieces for whatever devastating move Jessica had planned. As the conversation continued around her, Emma began mentally preparing herself for battle. She didn't know exactly what form the attack would take, but she knew it was coming. And when it did, she would be ready. Master Chun had always taught her that the best defense was awareness, understanding your opponent's strategy before they could fully implement it. Emma was beginning to understand Jessica's strategy, and what she saw made her realize that her 6 years of martial arts training might not be enough to protect her from this particular kind of violence, but she was going to find out. What happened next would be replayed in slow motion on dozens of phone screens for weeks to come, analyzed frame by frame like footage of a lightning strike or a meteor impact. But for those who witnessed it in real time, the speed and precision of Emma's response was so sudden, so utterly unexpected, that most people couldn't process what they were seeing until it was already over. Jessica, still basking in what she believed was her moment of total victory, made the fatal error of reaching toward Emma's torn dress. Whether she intended to further damage the fabric or simply wanted to draw more attention to the humiliating tear, her hand moved toward Emma's exposed side with the casual cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. Emma's response was instantaneous and devastating. Her right hand shot out and caught Jessica's wrist in a grip that stopped the motion cold. The speed was inhuman. One moment, Jessica's hand was reaching forward. The next, it was trapped in an iron hold that made her gasp in surprise and pain. "Let go of me," Jessica said, trying to pull her hand back and discovering that she couldn't. Emma's grip was like a vice, immovable and precise. "What do you think you're—" She never finished the sentence. Emma's left hand moved in a blur, her palm striking Jessica's solar plexus with surgical precision. The blow looked gentle, almost casual, but it hit with the focused power of 6 years of conditioning and training. Jessica's words cut off in a strangled gasp, as all the air rushed out of her lungs. Before Jessica could even begin to double over, Emma had released her wrist and stepped back into a perfect fighting stance. Her feet were positioned exactly shoulder width apart, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, her hands held in the traditional guard position of Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. It was a stance that spoke of years of discipline and training, as natural to her as breathing. Jessica stumbled backward, clutching her stomach and trying desperately to catch her breath. Her face had gone pale, and her eyes were wide with shock, and something she had never experienced before in her 17 years of privilege and power, genuine fear. "What? She wheezed, still struggling to understand what had just happened to her. But Emma wasn't finished. Madison, seeing her leader stumbling and apparently under attack, rushed forward with the misguided bravery of someone who had never been in a real fight. Her approach was clumsy and telegraphed, driven by panic rather than skill. Emma didn't even look in Madison's direction. As the redhead reached out to grab her, Emma simply shifted her weight and threw a perfect side kick. That caught Madison in the hip, sending her stumbling sideways into a group of startled sophomore boys. The kick looked effortless, like Emma was just adjusting her position. But Madison went down hard and didn't get back up immediately. The crowd around them had gone completely silent. The music was still playing, but it seemed distant and surreal against the backdrop of what was unfolding on the dance floor. Students who had been dancing and laughing just moments before now stood frozen, their mouths open, their phones recording, their minds struggling to process the transformation they were witnessing. Chloe, who had been watching in growing horror since the moment Jessica's plan had been set in motion, took several quick steps backward and raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. "I don't want any trouble," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "I didn't want to do this in the first place." Emma's eyes flipped to her briefly, assessing threat level and finding none. Chloe was clearly not going to continue the fight, and Emma had no interest in pursuing someone who's backing down. Master Chun had taught her that a true warrior only used as much force as was necessary to end a conflict. Riley stood frozen between her loyalty to her friend and her complete inability to comprehend what she was seeing. The Emma she knew was quiet, studious, and gentle. This person standing in perfect fighting stance, having just disabled 2 attackers with movements too fast to follow, seemed like a completely different human being. "Emma?" Riley said uncertainly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What? How did you? Emma's stance relaxed slightly, but her attention remained focused on Jessica, who was slowly straightening up and beginning to breathe normally again. The shock was wearing off, being replaced by a rage that made Jessica's face flush red and her hands clench into fists. "You think you're tough?" Jessica spat, her voice hoarse but gaining strength. "You think you can just attack people because you're upset about a stupid dress?" The accusation was so backwards, so divorced from reality, that Emma almost laughed. Jessica was trying to reframe the situation, to make herself the victim of an unprovoked assault rather than the architect of a calculated humiliation. It was a masterful piece of psychological manipulation that might have worked if there hadn't been dozens of witnesses and multiple phones recording every moment. "I didn't attack anyone," Emma said calmly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I defended myself against someone who was trying to further damage my property and humiliate me in public." "Property?" Jessica laughed, but the sound was shrill and desperate. "It's a cheap dress from a thrift store. It's not like it was worth anything anyway." The comment was intended to inflict maximum psychological damage, to remind everyone present that Emma's dress was secondhand and inferior to Jessica's designer gown. But it backfired spectacularly, revealing Jessica's true character to everyone watching. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Even students who barely knew Emma could recognize the cruelty in Jessica's words. Making fun of someone's financial situation was considered low even by high school standards, and doing it after publicly humiliating them was crossing a line that most people weren't comfortable with. "That dress," Emma said quietly, "was altered by my mother. She spent hours making sure it fit me perfectly because she wanted me to feel beautiful at my first formal dance. Its monetary value is irrelevant." The simple statement carried more emotional weight than any dramatic speech could have. Emma's calm dignity in the face of Jessica's petty cruelty made the contrast between them crystal clear to everyone watching. Jessica seemed to realize that she was losing the narrative battle, that the crowd's sympathy was shifting away from her, despite her attempts to portray herself as the victim. Her desperation made her dangerous, and Emma could see it building in her posture and expression. "You're crazy," Jessica said, her voice getting louder. "Everyone can see that you're completely unstable. You just attacked 3 people because someone accidentally bumped into you at a dance." It was a last-ditch attempt to gaslight the situation, to make Emma doubt her own perception of what had happened. But Emma had spent 6 years learning to trust her instincts and observe situations clearly. She wasn't going to be manipulated into believing she was at fault for defending herself. "Jessica," Emma said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the vicinity pay attention, "you planned this. You spent weeks planning it. You positioned your friend strategically, created chaos to provide cover, and then deliberately tore my dress with the rings on your hand. None of this was accidental." The accuracy of Emma's assessments sent a visible shock through Jessica's system. Her face went pale again, and her eyes darted nervously to the phones that were still recording everything. She had been so confident in her plan, so sure that she could make it look like a series of innocent accidents, that she hadn't considered the possibility that her victim would be perceptive enough to unravel the deception. That's completely ridiculous," Jessica stammered. "I would never. Why would I even want to hurt someone I barely know?" But her denial lacked conviction, and several students in the crowd were nodding in recognition of Emma's explanation. Looking back on the evening's events with this new framework, Jessica's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The strategic positioning, the careful timing, the way she had orchestrated the crowd chaos, it all fell into place. Madison, who had finally managed to get back to her feet, limped over to Jessica's side. Her hip was clearly in pain from Emma's kick, and she was moving gingerly. "Jess, maybe we should just go," she said quietly, her earlier bravado completely gone. "No," Jessica snapped, her desperation making her reckless. "I'm not letting some psycho make me look like the bad guy here. Everyone saw what happened. She attacked us." Emma could see that Jessica was spiraling, that her need to maintain control was overriding her common sense. A rational person would have cut their losses and walked away, but Jessica's entire identity was built on dominance and social control. Admitting defeat, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, was psychologically impossible for her. "Jessica," Emma said, and there was something in her voice that made everyone nearby go completely quiet. "I want you to understand something very clearly. For 6 years, I have been training in traditional martial arts. I am a black belt in Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, and I have been taught to use these skills only when absolutely necessary for self-defense." The revelation sent a shockwave through the gathered students. Emma Richardson, the quiet girl who sat alone at lunch and never participated in sports, was apparently a trained fighter. It explained the impossible speed and precision of her movements, the perfect stances, the calm confidence in the face of multiple attackers. "What you did tonight," Emma continued, "was assault. You deliberately damaged my property and attempted to humiliate me in public. When I defended myself, you tried to make it seem like I was the aggressor. Now you have a choice." Jessica's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, her mind struggling to process this new information. Everything she thought she knew about Emma Richardson had just been revealed as completely wrong. "You can apologize for what you did and leave me alone for the rest of the school year," Emma said calmly. "Or you can continue to escalate this situation, and I will defend myself using whatever force is necessary." The ultimatum was delivered without emotion, like a mathematical equation being explained. Emma wasn't threatening Jessica, she was simply stating facts about cause and effect, action and consequence. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The entire gymnasium seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what Jessica Hamilton would choose. Around them, students continued to record everything on their phones, capturing every word and expression for posterity. Jessica's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, fear, anger, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. Emma could almost see her trying to figure out some way to salvage the situation, some angle that would let her maintain her position and power. But there was no angle. The truth was too clear, too obvious to everyone watching. Jessica Hamilton had picked a fight with the wrong person, and now she was facing consequences that her wealth and social status couldn't protect her from. When Jessica finally spoke, her voice was small and defeated. "I'm sorry about your dress." It wasn't a real apology, it was a tactical surrender designed to minimize her losses. But Emma had achieved her primary objective, which was to end the conflict and establish clear boundaries for future interactions. "Thank you," Emma said simply, then turned and walked toward the gymnasium exit with the same calm dignity she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. Riley hurried after her, still struggling to process everything she had witnessed. "Emma, wait, where are you going?" Emma paused at the door and looked back at her friend. "Home. My dress is torn, and I think the dance is over for me. But you just ... How did you ... When did you learn to fight like that?" Emma smiled softly, and for a moment she looked like the familiar friend Riley had always known. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Right now I just want to go home and change out of this dress." As they walked out into the cool night air, Emma could hear the buzz of conversation exploding behind them. By tomorrow morning, the story of what had happened at the spring formal would be all over social media, analyzed and debated by every student at Westfield High. But for now, Emma just wanted to get home to her parents and tell them about the most important lesson she had learned that night. Sometimes, the world doesn't let you choose whether or not to fight, but you can always choose how to fight, and what you're fighting for. By 7:30 a.m. on Monday morning, 3 separate videos of the spring formal incident had gone viral across multiple social media platforms. The hashtag dress to fight was trending locally, and the Westfield High School administration was facing its first major social media crisis of the academic year. Principal Margaret Chun, no relation to Emma's martial arts instructor, arrived at her office to find 17 missed calls from parents, 43 emails demanding explanations, and a parking lot full of news vans from 3 different local television stations. The story had somehow jumped from teenage social media to mainstream news overnight, transforming a high school dance drama into a broader conversation about bullying, self-defense, and the hidden lives of quiet students. The videos themselves told a story that was impossible to spin or misinterpret. The clearest footage, shot by junior Marcus Thompson from an elevated position near the bleachers, captured everything from Jessica's deliberate dress tearing to Emma's lightning-fast response. Viewed in slow motion, Jessica's accidental collision with Emma's dress looked unmistakably intentional, while Emma's defensive techniques displayed a level of skill that left martial arts experts commenting in amazement. "This girl has serious training," wrote it Sensei Mike 47, whose YouTube channel on traditional kung fu had over 2 million subscribers. That palm strike to the solar plexus was textbook Northern Shaolin, and the timing on that side kick was absolutely perfect. Whoever taught her knew what they were doing. The comment sections were overwhelmingly supportive of Emma, with thousands of users sharing their own stories of being bullied and wishing they had possessed the skills to defend themselves. Hashtag Justice for Emma began trending alongside hashtag Dress to Fight, and several anti-bullying organizations reached out to offer Emma opportunities to speak at conferences and events. But the real transformation was happening within the halls of Westfield High itself. Emma arrived at school Monday morning to find everything changed. Students who had never spoken to her before nodded respectfully as she passed. Underclassmen, who had previously been invisible to the social hierarchy, suddenly made eye contact and smiled. Teachers who had always seen her as just another quiet student were looking at her with new interest and respect. The most significant change was in the cafeteria. For 3 years, Emma had eaten lunch alone at a corner table, perfectly content with her solitude and her books. But on Monday, she found her usual table surrounded by students she barely knew. David Park, a freshman who had been targeted by various bullies since the beginning of the school year, was the first to approach. His left eye was still slightly swollen from an incident the previous week, when a group of seniors had decided to use him as entertainment. "Emma," he said hesitantly, clutching his lunch tray with nervous hands, "I wanted to thank you for what you did Saturday night. I know it wasn't about me, but seeing someone like Jessica Hamilton face consequences for once, it gave me hope." Before Emma could respond, she found herself surrounded by a growing circle of students, each with their own story of being targeted, excluded, or humiliated. They weren't asking her to be their protector or leader. They were simply grateful that someone had proven it was possible to stand up to the established power structure and win. "I never knew you were trained in martial arts," said Sophie Williams, a quiet junior who had been on the receiving end of Madison's casual cruelties for months. "I started looking up kung fu schools in the area last night. Do you think Master Chun would accept new students?" The question sparked a broader conversation about self-defense, confidence, and the difference between being a victim and being vulnerable. Emma found herself explaining the philosophical aspects of martial arts training, the emphasis on discipline and respect, the way that learning to fight had actually made her less likely to seek out conflict. "The goal isn't to become someone who goes around looking for fights," she explained to the growing group of listeners. "It's to become someone who can handle whatever situations life throws at you. Physical self-defense is just one part of it. The mental discipline and confidence are what really change your life." By Wednesday, Master Chun's traditional martial arts academy had received over 50 inquiries from Westfield High students and their parents. The elderly instructor, who had been content with his small group of dedicated students, suddenly found himself considering expansion for the first time in years. "Your demonstration at the dance," he told Emma during her regular Wednesday training session, "has brought great attention to our school. Many young people are now interested in learning the true way of martial arts." Emma, working through a complex form that combined kicks, strikes, and flowing movements, paused to consider his words. "I hope they understand that what happened Saturday wasn't about showing off or proving how tough I am. I just reached a point where I couldn't back down anymore." Master Chun nodded approvingly. "That is exactly the right attitude. You used your skills only when necessary, with precise force, and you stopped when the threat was neutralized. You brought honor to our teachings." The praise meant more to Emma than all the social media fame and attention she was receiving. Master Chun's approval was worth more than 1,000 viral videos or news interviews. Meanwhile, the 3 architects of Saturday night's disaster were dealing with consequences they had never imagined possible. Jessica Hamilton found herself in the unprecedented position of being a social pariah at her own school. The videos had revealed her true character so clearly that even her most loyal followers were distancing themselves. Her carefully cultivated image as the benevolent queen of Westfield High had been shattered, replaced by viral clips of her making. Cruel comments about Emma's cheap thrift store dress, and her obvious panic when confronted with real consequences. Her parents, mortified by the negative attention their daughter's behavior had brought to the family name, had enrolled her in anger management counseling and community service at a local homeless shelter. The irony of Jessica learning empathy by serving people she had previously looked down upon was not lost on anyone following the story. "I never meant for things to go that far," Jessica told her court-appointed counselor during their first session. "I just wanted to put her in her place. She was acting like she was better than everyone else." "Help me understand what you mean by her place," the counselor replied gently. "What place do you think Emma Richardson should occupy, and who gave you the authority to determine that?" The questions were forcing Jessica to confront the toxic worldview she had built her identity around, the belief that some people deserved respect and others deserved to be targets. It was painful, uncomfortable work, but it was necessary if she was going to become someone worthy of the second chance she was being offered. Madison Brooks was facing her own reckoning. The side kick to her hip had resulted in a deep bruise and a limp that lasted for over a week, serving as a daily reminder of her role in the incident. More damaging than the physical injury was the social fallout. She had been revealed as Jessica's willing accomplice, someone who participated in cruelty not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to belong. Her parents, both educators themselves, were deeply ashamed of their daughter's behavior. They had raised her to be better than this, to stand up for others rather than participate in tearing them down. The family conversations that followed were some of the most difficult of Madison's life. "We didn't raise you to be a follower of bullies," her mother had said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "We raised you to be a leader, someone who protects people who can't protect themselves." Madison was now volunteering with the school's peer mediation program, trying to prevent the kind of conflicts she had once helped create. It was humbling work that required her to confront the harm she had caused and to actively work toward becoming someone better. Of the three, Chloe Stewart was adapting most successfully to the new reality. Her quick surrender during the confrontation and her obvious discomfort with Jessica's plan had earned her some sympathy from both students and adults. More importantly, it had given her the courage to finally break free from Jessica's toxic influence. "I should have said no from the beginning," Chloe told Emma during the chance encounter in the library Tuesday afternoon. "I knew what we were planning was wrong, but I was too scared of being excluded to stand up to Jessica." Emma, who was researching colleges with strong martial arts programs, looked up from her laptop with understanding rather than judgment in her eyes. "It takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake. What matters now is what you do going forward." The conversation led to Chloe joining the group of students who had been spending lunch periods with Emma, learning about self-defense, confidence building, and the philosophy behind martial arts training. Unlike Jessica and Madison, whose consequences had been imposed from outside, Chloe was actively choosing to become someone better. The administration's response to the incident was swift and comprehensive. Principal Chun instituted new policies around bullying prevention, increased counselor availability, and launched a school-wide dialogue about the difference between conflict and systematic harassment. "What we learned from Saturday night," she announced during a special assembly Wednesday morning, "is that our students are carrying burdens and possessing strengths that we as adults aren't always aware of. We need to do better at seeing our students as complete human beings, not just the roles they appear to play in our social hierarchies." The assembly also featured a video message from Master Chun, who spoke about the true purpose of martial arts training and the responsibility that comes with physical capability. His words resonated with students who had been considering self-defense training as a response to the weekend's events. "Power without wisdom is dangerous," the elderly instructor said, his calm voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium sound system. Strength without compassion is worthless. If you choose to study martial arts, you must understand that you are learning not how to hurt others, but how to protect yourself and those who cannot protect themselves. The most unexpected consequence of the spring formal incident was the way it transformed the school's entire social ecosystem. The rigid hierarchy that had seemed unshakable just days before began to dissolve as students realized that social status based on fear and exclusion was ultimately fragile and meaningless. Students, who had been afraid to eat lunch with anyone outside their designated social group, began mixing freely. Underclassmen who had been targets of upper-class intimidation found their voices and began standing up for themselves and others. Teachers reported a noticeable decrease in hallway tensions and an increase in academic collaboration across traditional social boundaries. Emma herself was adapting to her new visibility with characteristic thoughtfulness. She declined most interview requests and speaking opportunities, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. When she did agree to speak publicly, her message was always the same. Everyone has the right to exist safely in their community, and everyone has the responsibility to protect that right for others. I didn't set out to become anyone's hero, she told the local news station during her only television interview. I was just a girl who got tired of being pushed around. The real heroes are the people who stand up for others even when they don't have the physical ability to protect themselves. By Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the spring formal, Westfield High School felt like a completely different place. The changes weren't just surface-level adjustments, they represented a fundamental shift in how students related to each other and understood their own power and responsibility within their community. Emma was walking to her car after school when she encountered Jessica Hamilton in the parking lot. It was their first face-to-face meeting since Saturday night, and both girls tensed as they recognized each other. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of everything that had happened between them hanging in the air. Then Jessica took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Emma," she said, her voice lacking any of its former arrogance, "I owe you a real apology. Not the half-hearted thing I said at the dance, but a genuine acknowledgement of what I did to you." Emma waited, saying nothing but listening intently. "I spent weeks planning to humiliate you," Jessica continued, her voice steady despite the obvious difficulty of the admission. "I targeted you because I was threatened by your confidence and independence. I wanted to tear you down because I thought it would make me feel better about myself. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology was everything the moment, at the dance, hadn't been genuine, specific, and accepting full responsibility without excuses or justifications. Emma considered her response carefully before speaking. "Thank you for that. I accept your apology. And I hope you find a way to use what you've learned to help other people instead of hurting them." As they parted ways and headed to their respective cars, both girls carried with them the understanding that their confrontation had changed far more than just their own lives. They had inadvertently sparked a transformation that would continue rippling outward long after they graduated and moved on to the next chapters of their stories. 3 months after the spring formal incident, Emma Richardson stood before a packed auditorium at the Regional Youth Leadership Conference, looking out at over 300 teenagers from schools across the state. The speaking engagement was one of the few she had accepted, and only because the conference organizers had convinced her that her story could genuinely help other young people facing similar challenges. The girl on stage bore little resemblance to the invisible student who had once hidden in the shadows of Westfield High's hallways. Emma's posture was confident without being aggressive, her voice clear and steady as she addressed the audience. She wore a simple but well-fitted navy dress, not from a consignment store this time, but purchased with money she had earned from a part-time job at Master Chun's Academy, where she now assisted with teaching younger students. "The most important thing I want you to understand," Emma said, her words carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system, is that standing up for yourself doesn't always require physical action. What changed my life wasn't learning how to fight, it was learning that I had value as a human being, regardless of what other people thought about me. In the front row, Riley Martinez beamed with pride as she watched her best friend command the attention of hundreds of peers. The two girls had grown even closer in the months following the dance. Their friendship deepened by the honest conversations about identity, courage, and the complexity of navigating high school social dynamics. Riley had been one of the first students to join Master Chun's academy after the incident, though her motivations were different from many of the others. She wasn't seeking to learn self-defense so much as she wanted to understand the discipline and philosophy that had shaped her friend's character. I realized I had been coasting through high school without really thinking about who I wanted to become, Riley had told Emma during one of their training sessions. Watching you stand up to Jessica made me realize that I needed to figure out what I believed in and what I was willing to stand for. The audience listened intently as Emma continued her presentation, sharing the lessons she had learned not just from martial arts training, but from the experience of finding her voice and using it responsibly. Real strength, she explained, isn't about being able to hurt someone who hurts you. It's about being able to choose your response instead of just reacting. It's about being able to protect not just yourself, but the people around you who might not be able to protect themselves. In the back of the auditorium, Master Chun sat quietly, his weathered hands folded in his lap, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. His student had become a teacher in her own right, sharing wisdom that went far beyond physical techniques. The old instructor was proud not just of Emma's martial arts skills, but of the person she had become. The academy had indeed expanded in the months following the spring formal incident, but Master Chun had been selective about the new students he accepted. He was looking for young people who were genuinely interested in the discipline and philosophy of martial arts, not just those seeking quick fixes to their social problems. Among his new students were several faces that would have been familiar to anyone who remembered that night at Westfield High. David Park, the freshman who had been targeted by bullies, had proven to be a dedicated and thoughtful student. His motivation wasn't revenge against those who had hurt him, but a genuine desire to build the kind of confidence that came from within. Master Chun teaches us that the strongest people are those who never have to prove their strength, David had explained to his parents when they questioned his sudden interest in martial arts. I don't want to learn how to fight bullies. I want to learn how to become the kind of person who doesn't need to fight anyone. Sophie Williams had also joined the academy, bringing with her a natural grace and dedication that impressed even Master Chun. Her training had given her the confidence to speak up in classes, to join student government, and to become an advocate for other students who were struggling to find their voices. But perhaps the most surprising new student was Chloe Stewart. Chloe's transformation in the months following the dance had been remarkable. She had not only broken free from Jessica's toxic influence but had actively worked to repair the damage her participation in the bullying had caused. She volunteered with anti-bullying programs, mentored younger students who were struggling socially, and had become one of the most vocal advocates for kindness and inclusion at Areki, Westfield High. Her request to train at Master Chun's academy had initially been met with skepticism from some of the other students, but Emma had advocated for giving her a chance. Everyone deserves the opportunity to become better than they were, Emma had told Master Chun during their private conversation about Chloe's application. She's genuinely trying to change, and I think training with us could help her find the strength to continue that growth. Master Chun had accepted Chloe as a student, but with conditions. She would need to demonstrate not just physical dedication, but a genuine commitment to the philosophical principles that underpinned their training. She would need to prove that she was seeking transformation, not just recreation. 6 months into her training, Chloe had become one of the academy's most improved students. The discipline required by martial arts had helped her develop the mental strength, to resist peer pressure and make decisions based on her own values, rather than fear of social exclusion. I spent so many years being afraid of not belonging, Chloe told Emma during a break between training sessions. But I've learned that belonging to the wrong group is worse than belonging to no group at all. I'd rather be alone and authentic than popular and fake. Madison Brooks had taken a different path toward redemption. Rather than joining the Martial Arts Academy, she had thrown herself into academic pursuits and volunteer work. Her participation in the peer mediation program had evolved into a genuine passion for conflict resolution and social justice. She was now planning to study psychology in college, with the goal of becoming a counselor who specialized in helping teenagers navigate social difficulties. Her own experience as both a bully and a victim had given her unique insights into the psychological dynamics that drove destructive behavior. "I can't undo the harm I caused," Madison had written in her college application essay, "but I can spend the rest of my life trying to prevent other people from making the same mistakes I made." The most dramatic transformation, however, belonged to Jessica Hamilton. The months following the spring formal had been the most difficult of Jessica's privileged life. The viral videos had followed her everywhere, making it impossible to escape the consequences of her actions. College admissions offices had seen the footage. Potential employers would be able to find it with a simple internet search. The humiliation she had tried to inflict on Emma had rebounded on her 100-fold, but the external consequences, devastating as they were, had ultimately led to internal changes that might not have happened otherwise. Stripped of her social status and forced to confront the reality of who she had become, Jessica had been compelled to rebuild her identity from the ground up. The anger management counseling had evolved into regular therapy sessions that helped her understand the insecurities and entitled thinking that had driven her behavior. The community service at the homeless shelter had exposed her to people whose struggles made her own problems seem trivial. Most importantly, she had begun the long, difficult work of developing genuine empathy for others. Jessica's parents had initially tried to protect her from the consequences of her actions, hiring lawyers and public relations consultants to manage the fallout. But Jessica herself had eventually asked them to stop. "I need to face what I did," she had told them during a family meeting 6 weeks after the dance. "Trying to make this go away isn't going to help me become a better person. It's just going to teach me that I can hurt people without consequences. And I can't live with that anymore." The decision to take full responsibility for her actions had been the beginning of Jessica's real transformation. She had written personal apology letters to every student she could remember bullying or humiliating over the years. She had volunteered to speak at anti-bullying assemblies, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. She had used her family's resources, not to escape consequences, but to fund programs that helped other students avoid the mistakes she had made. Now, as Emma concluded her presentation at the Youth Leadership Conference, Jessica sat in the audience near the back. Having driven 3 hours to hear the girl she had once targeted speak about resilience and growth, Jessica had not approached Emma or tried to insert herself into her former victim's story. She had simply come to listen, to learn, and to continue the work of understanding how her actions had affected another human being. It was part of her ongoing therapy and personal growth, but it was also an act of respect for the person she had wronged. During the question and answer session that followed Emma's presentation, a girl from a rural school district raised her hand. "What do you say to people who think that learning martial arts just creates more violence?" she asked. "My parents are worried that if I start training, I'll become aggressive or start looking for fights." Emma smiled, recognizing a question she had heard many times before. "That's actually a common misconception about martial arts training. In reality, learning how to fight taught me how much I didn't want to fight. When you understand the real consequences of violence, when you know how much damage you could potentially cause, you become much more careful about when and how you use those skills." She paused, looking out at the engaged faces in the audience. Master Chun always tells his students that a true martial artist is someone who can walk away from a fight. Anyone can throw a punch when they're angry. But it takes real strength and wisdom to choose peace when you have the power to destroy. The answer sparked a broader discussion about the difference between strength and aggression, between confidence and arrogance. Emma found herself drawing on lessons that went far beyond her formal martial arts training, sharing insights about human nature and conflict resolution that she had gained through her own experiences and observations. After the conference ended, Emma was approached by representatives from several colleges that offered programs combining martial arts, psychology, and education. Her unique experience and natural teaching ability had caught the attention of admissions counselors who saw potential for her to become a leader in youth development and conflict prevention. But Emma wasn't ready to make those decisions yet. She had one more year of high school to complete, and she wanted to continue working with Master Chen and helping other students at Westfield High navigate their own challenges. The drive home from the conference gave Emma time to reflect on how much her life had changed since that night at the spring formal. She had never intended to become a public speaker or youth advocate. She had simply reached a point where she couldn't remain silent and invisible anymore. The incident had taught her that individual actions could have far-reaching consequences, that standing up for herself had inadvertently given permission for dozens of other students to find their own voices. It was a responsibility she didn't take lightly. As she pulled into the parking lot of Master Chun's academy for her regular Saturday training session, Emma saw familiar cars belonging to Riley, Chloe, David, Sophie, and several other students who had joined the academy in recent months. Through the windows, she could see them moving through their forms with increasing skill and confidence. Master Chun met her at the door, his lined face creased with the kind of smile that came from watching students grow into their potential. "How was the conference?" he asked as they walked into the training hall together. "Good," Emma replied, changing into her training clothes. "I think some of the students really understood what we were trying to teach them about the difference between power and wisdom." "And you?" Master Chun asked, settling into his teaching position at the front of the class. "What did you learn today?" Emma considered the question as she took her place among the other students, no longer the isolated girl she had been 8 months ago, but part of a community built on mutual respect and shared growth. "I learned that sharing your story can help other people find theirs," she said finally. "And that sometimes the best thing you can do with the strength you've built is use it to help other people build their own." Master Chun nodded approvingly and called the class to order. As they began their warm-up exercises, Emma looked around at the faces of her fellow students, former victims who were becoming warriors, former aggressors who were learning wisdom, and young people who were simply trying to figure out who they wanted to become. The lesson that had begun on a gymnasium dance floor 8 months ago was still being learned, still spreading from person to person like ripples in a pond. Emma had discovered that real transformation wasn't a single moment of dramatic action, but an ongoing commitment to growth, courage, and using whatever strength you possessed in service of others. As the class moved into their forms, Emma felt the familiar satisfaction of perfect technique combined with purposeful intention. She was no longer the invisible girl trying to hide from the world, nor was she the warrior who had shocked everyone with her hidden abilities. She was something new, a young woman who understood that true strength came not from the ability to defeat others, but from the wisdom to lift them up. And in that understanding, she had found not just her voice, but her purpose. The dance floor confrontation had ended in minutes, but the lessons it taught would last a lifetime. The bronze plaque outside the newly constructed wing of Westfield High School reads simply, "The Emma Richardson Center for Student Advocacy and Conflict Resolution." Inside, the modern facility hummed with activity as trained peer mediators, guidance counselors, and student volunteers worked together to create the kind of supportive environment that hadn't existed during Emma's time as a student. Emma herself stood in the center's main conference room, now 22 years old and holding a master's degree in educational psychology with a specialization in youth development. She had returned to Westfield not as a student, but as the center's first director, a position created specifically for her after her undergraduate thesis on transformative responses to adolescent conflict had gained national attention in educational circles. "The beauty of what we've built here," Emma explained to the visiting delegation from the State Department of Education, "is that it addresses not just the symptoms of bullying and social conflict, but the underlying systems that allow them to flourish in the first place." The tour group, consisting of administrators, policymakers, and researchers from across the country, listened intently as Emma described the center's innovative approach to student support. Unlike traditional anti-bullying programs that focus primarily on punishment and prevention, the Richardson Center emphasized transformation, empowerment, and community building. Through the conference room's large windows, the visitors could see students engaged in various activities throughout the space. In one corner, a group of sophomores worked with peer mediators to resolve a conflict over social media posts. In another area, a martial arts instructor, one of Master Chun's former students, led a class on physical and emotional self-defense. Near the entrance, student volunteers staffed an information desk where their peers could seek help without fear of judgment or mandatory reporting. "What makes this program unique," continued Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, Westfield's current principal, "is that it was designed by someone who experienced both sides of the social conflict equation. Emma understands what it feels like to be targeted, but she also understands the complex factors that create targeting behavior in the first place." Center's existence was a testament to how far Westfield High had come in the 5 years since the spring formal incident. The school had become a model for other districts struggling with bullying and social violence, hosting conferences and training sessions for educators from around the world. But perhaps more importantly, it had become a place where students like Emma, quiet, thoughtful, and often overlooked, could find their voices and develop their potential without having to endure trauma first. "One of our core principles," Emma explained as she led the group through the center's various spaces, "is that every student has both something to contribute and something to learn. We don't divide people into categories of victims and aggressors, helpers and helped. Everyone participates in creating the kind of community we want to live in." In the center's resource library, the visitors encountered Chloe Stewart, now a senior at nearby State University studying social work. She was volunteering her time to help coordinate the center's peer mentorship program, drawing on her own experiences to help other students navigate the complexities of social pressure and identity formation. "5 years ago, I was part of a group that systematically tormented another student," Chloe told the visiting delegation without flinching. "I participated in cruelty because I was afraid of being excluded, because I didn't have the tools to understand my own worth outside of other people's approval. This center teaches students those tools before they're forced to learn them through crisis." Chloe's transformation had continued throughout her college years. She had become a sought-after speaker on topics related to bystander intervention and the psychology of social conformity. Her senior thesis research focused on developing early intervention programs for students who showed signs of becoming either perpetrators or victims of social aggression. "The goal isn't to prevent all conflict," she explained to the interested educators. "Conflict is a normal part of human interaction. The goal is to teach people how to engage in conflict constructively, how to disagree without dehumanizing, how to assert their needs without denying others' dignity." The tour continued to the center's crown jewel, a state-of-the-art training facility where students could learn various forms of self-defense, conflict de-escalation, and emotional regulation. Master Chen, now in his 70s but still moving with the fluid grace of a lifelong martial artist, demonstrated techniques to a mixed group of students, teachers, and parents. "True strength," he told the assembled group, his voice carrying. The wisdom of decades of teaching is not the ability to overcome others, but the ability to overcome yourself. When you master your own fear, anger, and insecurity, you become capable of responding to any situation with wisdom and compassion. Among his current students was David Park, now a confident high school senior who had been accepted to several prestigious universities with full scholarships. The frightened freshman who had once been an easy target for bullies had grown into a natural leader who used his experiences to help other vulnerable students find their strength. Master Chun taught me that being small doesn't mean being weak, David explained to a group of younger students after the demonstration. Physical size is just one factor in a person's capability. What matters more is your mental preparation, your understanding of yourself and your situation, and your commitment to protecting not just yourself, but others around you. The center also housed a multimedia studio where students created content designed to promote empathy and understanding. Riley Martinez, now a successful documentary filmmaker in her second year out of college, had helped design the space and regularly returned to mentor student media creators. Her latest project, a feature-length documentary about the long-term effects of the Westfield High transformation, had been selected for several film festivals and was being distributed to schools nationwide as an educational resource. The most important thing we learned, Riley told the visiting educators as she showed them student-created videos on conflict resolution and community building, is that change doesn't happen through single dramatic moments. It happens through sustained commitment to doing better, day after day, choice after choice. The visitors were particularly impressed by the center's data collection and analysis capabilities. Emma had insisted that every program and intervention be rigorously evaluated for effectiveness, creating a body of research that was helping schools across the country implement similar initiatives. In the 5 years since the center opened, Emma explained, pointing to charts and graphs displayed on the conference room's smartboards, Westfield High has seen a 78% reduction in reported bullying incidents, a 45% improvement in overall student satisfaction surveys, and a 62% increase in students seeking help for mental health concerns before they reach crisis levels. But beyond the statistics, the real measure of the center's success could be seen in the faces and stories of the students it served. Young people who might once have suffered in silence now had multiple pathways to find support. Students who might have become aggressors learned alternative ways to build self-esteem and social connection. Madison Brooks, now completing her doctoral program in counseling psychology, served on the center's advisory board and regularly returned to conduct research and training sessions. Her focus on the psychological factors that contribute to bullying behavior had made her a recognized expert in the field. What we've learned through our research here, Madison told the visiting delegation during a formal presentation, is that most aggressive behavior in adolescence stems from unmet psychological needs, the need for belonging, significance, autonomy, and competence. When we address those underlying needs constructively, the aggressive behaviors naturally diminish. Her own journey from bully to healer had become a case study in transformative justice and the possibility of redemption through genuine accountability and service to others. Even Jessica Hamilton's story had become part of the center's educational programming, though she herself remained largely private about her experiences. Now working as a victims' rights advocate in a neighboring state, Jessica had quietly contributed to the center's funding and occasionally spoke to groups about the long-term consequences of bullying behavior, not just for victims, but for perpetrators as well. The most important thing young people need to understand, she had written in a letter that was read aloud during the center's dedication ceremony, is that every person you encounter is fighting battles you know nothing about. When you choose cruelty, you're not just hurting someone in that moment, you're potentially derailing an entire life trajectory. But when you choose kindness, you might be providing exactly the support someone needs to become their best self. As the day-long tour concluded, Emma found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had begun with a torn dress on a gymnasium dance floor. That night had been one of the worst experiences of her young life, but it had also become the catalyst for changes that had improved the lives of thousands of students. "The center exists," Emma told the departing visitors, "because we learned that individual courage can become collective transformation. When one person refuses to accept that cruelty is inevitable, it gives permission for others to imagine something better." That evening, as Emma walked through the quiet hallways of Westfield High, she paused at the display case near the main entrance. Among the trophies and awards was a simple framed photograph from the spring formal 5 years earlier, not the viral videos of the confrontation, but a picture taken earlier in the evening showing her and Riley laughing together on the dance floor. Data was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we carry within us the capacity for joy, growth, and transformation. The girl in that photograph could never have imagined the path that lay ahead of her, but she had possessed the one essential ingredient for change, the willingness to stand up for her own dignity when the moment demanded it. As Emma locked up the center and headed home to the apartment she shared with Riley, who had returned to Westfield to document the ongoing transformation, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of work that mattered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students who needed support, new opportunities to turn conflict into growth. The dance floor confrontation had ended in minutes, but the lessons it taught would last a lifetime, not just for those who had experienced it directly, but for the countless young people who would benefit from the systems, programs, and cultural changes it had inspired. In the end, Emma Richardson had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength lies not in the ability to defend yourself, but in the commitment to create a world where fewer people need defending. And that lesson, multiplied across hundreds of students and dozens of schools, was changing the very nature of what it meant to grow up in America. The story that had begun with a shy girl in a consignment store dress had become something far larger, a testament to the power of individual courage to create collective change. One person, one choice, one moment of standing up at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.